I have 14 voicemails from my brother, and I haven't listened to any of them. That's not true. I listened to the first one back in April, before I understood what I was hearing. He called from the Whitcomb Trail around 6 in the evening, said he'd twisted his ankle near the second overlook. Nothing serious, just slow going. Might be after dark when he got back to the car. His voice was normal. Annoyed at himself, maybe. That's it. That's the whole message. He never made it back to the car. They searched for 11 days. Nothing. No pack, no boot print past the second overlook. Nothing on the ridge cameras the Forestry Service put in after some other incident years back. My mother stopped eating for most of that first week. I drove up twice and stood at the trailhead both times and didn't go in, because I told myself I wasn't the kind of person who'd find something the actual search team missed, and going in alone would just be one more person to look for. The second voicemail came 4 days after he went missing. I want to be clear about that. 4 days. His phone was dead. Everyone agreed his phone was dead. The last ping off a tower had it at 9% battery the night he disappeared. And then 4 days later, at 3:40 in the morning, I had a missed call from his number and a voicemail sitting in my inbox like it had always been there. I didn't listen to it that night. I called my mother instead, woke her up, told her, and she made a sound I still hear sometimes when I'm almost asleep. We called the detective assigned to the case. He said phones do strange things when they're damaged, delayed transmissions, towers holding messages longer than they should. There were explanations. He asked me to send him the voicemail. I did. He never told me what was on it. I never asked, because by then I'd made a decision I'm still not sure was the right one. I didn't listen either. More came. Not on any schedule I could find a pattern in. 1 a week, sometimes 2 in a single day, always from his number, always after his phone had supposedly died somewhere on that mountain and never been found. 14 now. My mother listened to the third one, against the detective's advice, and she won't tell me what was on it. She just won't. She gets a look on her face like the question itself costs her something and changes the subject every time, and my mother has never once in her life avoided a hard conversation before this. I kept the phone. I never deleted a single one. I told myself I was preserving evidence, which is what the detective told me to do, but that's not really it. I think some part of me believed that if I never listened, he wasn't really gone yet. The messages just sat there, red numbers stacking up on a little envelope icon, a countdown running in a direction I didn't want to think about. Then 2 weeks ago, my mother called me crying, saying she wanted to hear his voice just once more, just the first one where he sounded fine, and asked me to come sit with her while she played all of them, start to finish, because she couldn't do it alone and the detective had stopped returning her calls the way he used to. I said yes before I let myself think about it. We sat on her couch on a Tuesday afternoon with the blinds half down and my phone on the coffee table between us like something we were both afraid to touch. The first one was the ankle, the normal one, and she cried through the whole 11 seconds of it, and I held her hand and thought, okay, we can do this. The second one was 11 seconds of static, and then, right at the end, a breath. Not words. Just one long breath, like someone had picked up right as the message cut off. The third one my mother had already heard, and she wouldn't look at the phone while it played. She just stared at the wall, and it was 40 seconds of nothing, dead air, until the very last 3 seconds, where a voice, his voice, said my name. Not hers, mine. Just my name, flat, no question mark on it, like he was reading it off a list. I wanted to stop there. She said we had to keep going, that we'd started now, and stopping partway would be worse, and I believed her because I wanted to believe her. The messages got longer as we went. Longer than a working voicemail limit should allow. Some of them 3-4 minutes of mostly silence, mostly static, with things buried in it. Footsteps that weren't his gait, 2 even, 2 measured. A sound that might have been wind through a cave mouth, or might have been someone breathing very close to a phone they were holding wrong. On the 9th one, a full sentence, clear as anything, his voice saying he was fine, he just needed a little more time, he'd found somewhere warm. My mother made a sound then that wasn't crying anymore. The 12th one was the one that made me shut the phone off before it finished. It started the way the others did. Static, uneven breathing, and then, layered underneath it, so quiet I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it, a second voice, not his. Older, or just different, hard to say which, saying something I couldn't make out except for one clear word near the end. Count. I stopped it there. My mother wanted to keep going, and I told her no, not tonight, and for the first time since April, she didn't argue with me. I called the detective the next morning and told him about the second voice. He was quiet for a long time before he said the forensic audio team had flagged something similar on the file I'd sent months ago, an anomaly they hadn't been able to explain and hadn't wanted to worry us about until they understood it better. I asked him what that meant. He said they were still working on it. I asked if it was possible for a dead phone, one that had never been recovered, buried somewhere on 11 square miles of mountain, to keep transmitting voicemail for months. He didn't answer that one at all. There are 2 messages left. My mother wants to hear them together this weekend, and I've told her I need a little more time, which is the exact thing my brother's voice said on message 9, and I didn't realize I'd used the same words until they were already out of my mouth and it was too late to take them back. I still have the phone. I look at the number 13 sitting there sometimes, small and red, and I think about the word count. And I think about how in 8 months, nobody has ever explained to me how a phone with a dead battery, lost on a mountain nobody could find him on, keeps calling my number in the middle of the night. And I think, more than anything, about how the 2 messages I haven't heard yet are the only 2 that were left after he'd already been missing long enough that even the detective, in a low voice near the end of our last call, stopped calling it a search and started calling it something else, a word he caught himself on and didn't finish saying. The ribbon was orange, the same shade the county uses for its trail markers, and that's the only reason I didn't rip it down the second I saw it. I've hiked Copper Hollow every Saturday for going on 3 years. I know which switchbacks flood in spring, which oak has the wasp nest nobody's bothered to clear, which mile marker is missing its number because some kid probably pried it off with a rock. I know this trail the way you know your own hallway in the dark. So when I came around the bend past the Second Creek crossing and saw a ribbon tied 7 feet up a maple, higher than any trail crew tech would bother climbing for, I stopped walking. Not because it scared me yet. Because it didn't fit. I stood there long enough that a woman with 2 dogs passed me and asked if I was lost. I said no, just looking at something, and she gave me the kind of nod people give when they've decided you're fine, but a little strange, and kept going. Below the first ribbon, lower, at maybe chest height, hung a second one, and this one was angled, pointing off the packed dirt of the main trail into a stand of younger trees where there was no path at all. Not officially, but when I looked closer, the underbrush there was worn down in a thin track, the kind that gets made by repeated footsteps rather than deer. I want to be honest about why I followed it. It wasn't bravery. It was the same reason I read the last page of a book I'm only halfway through. I needed to know what it was before I could stop thinking about it. The unofficial trail was rougher, but not difficult, and every 50 or 60 feet another ribbon appeared, always that same height, always tied in a tight double knot instead of the sloppy granny knots the county guys use when they're rushing to finish a section before dark. Whoever did this had time. Whoever did this came back to check their work. 15 minutes in, I found a canvas camp chair, the folding kind you'd bring to a kid's soccer game, set up behind an outcrop of rock. It wasn't facing the unofficial trail I was on. It was angled back toward Copper Hollow's main path, toward the exact spot where hikers slow down to catch their breath before the last climb to the overlook. I've thought about that chair 100 times since, and the thing that gets me isn't that it was there. It's that it was clean. No leaves in the seat, no cobwebs between the frame bars, like someone had folded it up and carried it out after every single use. There were marks carved into the bark of the tree behind the chair, low, at sitting height. Tally marks, grouped in 5s. The way you'd count something over a long stretch of time if you wanted to keep an accurate record and didn't trust yourself to remember the number otherwise. I counted 11 full groups before I made myself stop counting and started walking back the way I came, faster than I meant to, my boots slipping once on loose gravel where I wasn't watching my feet. I made it about 30 yards before I heard him behind me, not running. Walking at a pace that matched mine exactly, like he'd been keeping that distance the whole time and only let me hear him once he wanted to be heard. "You're off trail." A man's voice, older, unbothered. I turned around. He had on a green rain jacket, zipped to the collar, even though it hadn't rained in 9 days and the forecast didn't call for it that week either. 60, maybe 65, clean-shaven. The kind of face you'd trust at a hardware store counter. Sorry. I saw the ribbon and thought it was a shortcut. It's not for hikers, he said, and something about the flatness of it, the way he didn't ask me a single question, not who I was or what I'd seen, told me he'd said that sentence to someone before. More than once. It came out too smooth. Okay. Heading back now. I angled past him, giving him more room than the trail really needed, and he let me go without a word. But I felt his eyes on my back the entire walk down, a physical weight between my shoulder blades that didn't lift until I hit the main trail and could see other hikers again. I told myself, walking to my car, that it was probably nothing. A weird man with a weird hobby. People count things. People have chairs in the woods. I made it through the whole drive home convincing myself of that, and I almost believed it by the time I got there. Tuesday night, scrolling a local hiking group on my phone, I saw a post from a woman asking if anyone had information about her sister, last seen leaving for a solo hike on Copper Hollow 3 weeks earlier. There was a photo. Brown hair, a red jacket, smiling at a birthday party in the background. I read the comments twice before I called the ranger station because I needed to be sure I wasn't about to waste someone's time over nothing. The ranger who answered didn't sound like he thought it was nothing, though he didn't say that outright. He asked me to describe everything: the ribbon height, the knot style, the chair, the tally marks, the jacket the man was wearing, and he wrote it all down without interrupting once. 2 days later, he called me back. They'd gone out with 2 officers to the location I described. The chair was gone. The ribbons were gone, cut close to the branches, no scraps left behind. The tally marks had been sanded off the bark, the wood underneath still pale and raw where the file had gone through, fresh enough that you could smell it if you got close. Was anyone at the trailhead matching what I described? I asked. No one, he said. Then, after a pause that went on a little too long, we did find something else though. New ribbon, same color as what you described, about a quarter-mile past where you turned around. This one wasn't tied to a branch. It was staked into the ground, marking a spot at the edge of a drop-off most people never get close enough to see. He said they were looking into what it meant. That was 6 weeks ago. I haven't been back to Copper Hollow since, and I've caught myself, more than once, driving past its trailhead on my way somewhere else, checking the parking lot for a green jacket I hope I never see again, and thinking about 11 groups of 5 freshly sanded away like someone didn't want a record left behind, and wondering how much higher that number would have had to climb before it stopped being a private thing and started being evidence. They found my father's boots 400 yards off the marked trail, laced, tied properly, sitting side by side on a flat rock like he'd stepped out of them on purpose and walked away in his socks. That was the first thing the search coordinator told us on day 2 before they'd found anything else. And it's the detail that's never left me, because my father tied his laces in a double knot his whole life. An old habit from working construction, and these were tied that way too. Whoever left those boots there knew how he tied his shoes. That's where this actually starts, if I'm honest, not with him going missing, but with that detail, because it's the first thing that made me stop believing the simple explanation everyone wanted me to accept. The official version, the one the Rangers offered first, was that he'd gotten disoriented, wandered off trail, maybe took his boots off at some point, for a reason that made sense to him in a confused state. Hypothermia does strange things to judgment. I let myself believe that for exactly 1 day, because it was easier than the alternative, and because my father was 68, and it's the explanation that doesn't require anyone else to have done anything. Day 4, they found a second thing. A strip of fabric from his jacket, torn clean, not ripped by brush, snagged on a low branch a mile further out, in a direction that made no geographic sense if he'd simply wandered from where the boots were. You don't walk a mile in socks over that terrain without leaving blood, and there was none anywhere, which the search coordinator kept mentioning like it was good news, and I kept not understanding why it felt like the opposite. Day 6, a hiker unrelated to the search called in a tip. She'd passed a man on the trail 3 days before my father went missing who'd asked her, casually, conversationally, whether she hiked alone often and whether anyone knew her route that day. She hadn't thought much of it until she saw the news. She gave a description, nothing that matched anyone we knew. Older man, forgettable, the kind of face you wouldn't pick out of 5 people standing in a line. Day 9, a second hiker called in almost the same story. Different day, different section of trail, same kind of question, similar description. Neither hiker had been harmed. Neither had gone missing. Whatever this was, it wasn't grabbing people at random off the trail. It was asking a question first, and only some answers, apparently, led somewhere bad. I went back to the trail myself on day 11, against the coordinator's advice, because I needed to see where the boots had been sitting, and my sister came with me because she wouldn't let me go alone. We found the flat rock easily enough, still slightly discolored where the boots had sat exposed to weather for days before the search team bagged them. My sister crouched down next to it and went very still. "There's something under here," she said. It was a small laminated card, tucked into a gap beneath the rock's edge, where it wouldn't wash away in rain, where someone had clearly meant it to be found by someone looking closely enough, someone who cared enough to crouch down and check. On it, typed, not handwritten, was a short list of names. 6 of them. My father's was the 4th. We didn't recognize any of the other 5. We gave the card to the coordinator, who ran the names, and came back 2 days later, quieter than he'd been on any previous call, and told us that, of the 5 names we didn't know, 3 belonged to hikers who had gone missing on trails in other counties over the previous 4 years. None of the cases ever solved. All of them initially explained away as disorientation or misadventure, the same way ours had almost been explained away. The 4th name belonged to someone who had reported a strange encounter, similar to the 2 hikers who'd called our search line and walked away fine. The 6th name, the last one on the list, hadn't happened yet, as far as anyone could tell. No missing person report. No hiker matching it in any database. I think about that 6th name more than I think about almost anything else now. Not because I know who it belongs to. Because I don't. And because whoever built that list, whoever left it under a rock exactly where they knew a family member would eventually crouch down looking for answers, wrote it before it was true, the same confident, patient handwriting you'd use for something you already knew was coming. They never found my father. The search was scaled back after 3 weeks, then closed after 2 months. Filed the way the coordinator said. These things usually get filed when there's no body and no suspect and no theory anyone's willing to put their name to officially. I still have a photograph of that card on my phone. 6 names, 1 of them ours, 1 of them still, as far as I know, unclaimed. And some nights I catch myself wondering less about what happened to my father and more about who's going to become the 7th name, and whether they've already been asked that first casual question on some trail neither of us has ever heard of. My phone says 11:58, and I have 4% battery and no signal, and I need you to know what happened before it dies, so I'm writing this in my notes app, and if you're reading it, someone found my phone, which means I didn't make it back down, and I need you to call my sister first, not the police first, my sister, because she'll know what to do faster than they will. We split up 2 hours ago. That was my idea, and I need that on record too. Derek wanted to stay together, said it a few times, got quiet and annoyed when I told him I was doubling back for the trekking pole. I dropped near the last switchback, said fine, go, I'll keep going toward the ridge, text me when you're back on the main trail. I said okay. That was the last thing either of us said to the other in person. I found the pole in 9 minutes. Should have taken 5, but I got turned around near a rock formation that all looks the same in the dark, my headlamp throwing about 8 feet of visibility and everything past, that just gone. I texted Derek. No signal. Message sat there with a little red exclamation point, undelivered, and I told myself it would send once I got higher, and I started climbing back toward where I thought the ridge trail was. I want to write down that I heard him call my name around 10:40. I know it was 10:40 because I checked my phone right after, out of instinct, the way you check the time when something happens that you know you'll need to remember later. It didn't sound close. It sounded like it came from below me, off to the left, which didn't make sense because Derek should have been ahead of me on the ridge trail, higher up, not below. I called back. Nothing. I kept moving toward where the ridge trail should have connected, and it didn't connect, not where the map said it would. And I want whoever reads this to know I did check the map. I'm not an idiot, I've hiked before. But the trail just stopped existing where it was supposed to be, packed dirt turning into unmarked scrub with no warning. At 11 I heard him again. Closer this time. Except, it wasn't words this time. It was closer to a sound a person makes when they're out of breath and trying to call out anyway. And I called his name maybe 6 times in a row, and my voice cracked on the last one, and nothing came back. I sat down for a minute because my legs weren't working right. I want that written down honestly. I sat down on a rock, and I couldn't make myself stand for almost a full minute, and during that minute I heard footsteps. Definitely footsteps. Definitely not mine. Coming from somewhere behind the rock I was sitting on. Slow, unhurried, like whoever it was already knew exactly where I was and wasn't in any rush to close the distance. I moved. I don't remember standing up, I just remember moving, uphill, away from the sound, and I didn't stop until my calves were screaming and I couldn't hear the footsteps anymore, which somehow felt worse than hearing them. 11:31. I found the ridge trail marker. Actual county trail marker, the real one, half rotted but real, and for about 30 seconds I felt something close to okay. I texted Derek again, watched it fail to send again. Started following the marked trail down the correct direction. I checked twice. 11:44. Derek's phone flashlight, or a flashlight, bobbing about 60 yards below me on the trail, moving toward me steady, and I called out his name, and this time something called back, my name, in his voice, and I started moving toward it fast, faster than I should have on that terrain, and I was maybe 20 yards away when I stopped, because the way it was moving was wrong. Derek limps. Torn his ACL 2 years ago, favors his left leg going downhill. Everyone who's hiked with him knows the rhythm of his walk. Whatever was carrying that light down there wasn't limping. It moved even, both sides, too even, the kind of even that looks wrong precisely because a person's walk is never actually that symmetrical. And it kept saying my name in his voice, same inflection, same pitch, calling it out at steady 4-second intervals like a metronome instead of like someone worried and looking for me. I turned off my own light and went still against a tree, and it walked past me at maybe 15 feet, still calling my name into the dark ahead of it, evenly, patiently, like it had all night and no reason to hurry, and I didn't breathe until the light was gone around the bend below. That was 40 minutes ago. I've been climbing since, away from the trail, which I know is the wrong thing to do. Every piece of advice says stay on the trail, but I can't make myself go back down it. My phone has 3% now. No signal still. I don't know if Derek is somewhere on this mountain calling my name for real, in his real voice with his real limp, and I passed him without knowing, too scared to check, and that thought is worse than almost anything else that's happened tonight. If you're reading this, please call my sister first. And if you're a search team and you find 2 sets of footprints that both look like mine, going different directions from this spot, I need you to know only one of them is actually me, and I have no way of telling you which.